Welcome to this historical explainer. Today we're diving straight into the blood, the dust, and the absolute destiny of a boy who became the ultimate world conqueror. We are unpacking the life of a figure whose very name made empires tremble, tracing the raw, unstoppable momentum of Alexander the Great.
This is the saga of a force of nature that swept all the way from the Greek seas right to the formidable borders of India. Imagine achieving the absolute peak of human ambition, literally conquering the known world before your 30th birthday, only to realize at the very end that you take absolutely nothing with you. It's this wild story of unparalleled triumph mixed with some really profound irony.
Part 1. Birth of a Great Warrior.
We kick things off in 356 BC in Macedonia. Legend has it he was born on a night so fateful that the spectacular temple of Artemis actually burned to the ground. And just think about how wildly his life escalated from there. He goes from being crowned king in 336 BC to conquering these massive continent-spanning territories to meeting a sudden death in 323 BC. It all happened in basically a single decade. It's like a flash of lightning across history.
So, how exactly do you build a world conqueror? Well, he had a pretty extreme setup. His mother, Olympias, deeply instilled this divine complex in him, genuinely convincing him he was the actual son of Zeus. On top of that, he was tutored by Aristotle, yes, the Aristotle, who taught him warfare, science, and philosophy. And if you want proof of his guts early on, he tamed this massive, terrifying wild horse named Bucephalus, just by noticing the poor animal was scared of its own shadow.
When young Alexander cleverly calmed that wild horse, his father, King Philip, was just in absolute awe. He delivered this legendary line, "My son, find a kingdom for yourself. Macedonia is too small for you." He knew right then and there that their borders could never hold this kid's ambition.
Which brings us to Part 2. Alexander's terror over Greece.
Because before he could take over the world, he had to secure his own backyard. And he was just 20 years old when he had to do it. Take a second to let that sink in. At 20, his father is mysteriously assassinated, and overnight he inherits this incredibly volatile, rebellious kingdom that just sees his youth as a massive weakness.
But they learned the hard way exactly who they were dealing with. To crush the Greek rebellions, Alexander didn't just defeat the city-state of Thebes. He completely obliterated it. He turned a deeply ancient civilization into ashes in a matter of hours. It was a brutal, terrifying broadcast to the world. An era of unimaginable power had officially begun.
Part 3. Conquest of Persia and Egypt.
With Greece totally terrified into submission, he locks his sights on the ultimate prize, the massive Persian Empire. The turning point here at the Battle of Issus was the Macedonian phalanx. Picture an ancient human tank. By using these super tight formations with overlapping shields and ridiculously long spears, Alexander's forces completely outmaneuvered the massive army of King Darius III. The shock of this strategy literally forced Darius, the most powerful man in Asia, to abandon his chariot and run for his life.
After that, the momentum shifts down to Egypt, and the contrast is absolutely stunning. Alexander essentially just marches right in without drawing a single sword. The people there were so exhausted by Persian rule that they welcomed him as a liberator. He founds the legendary city of Alexandria, and then, deep out in the desert at the Siwa Oasis, the priests go ahead and declare him a pharaoh and the literal son of God. So now, that divine complex of his is backed by an entire nation.
And his mindset during all this is perfectly summed up by the legend of the Gordian knot. As he's marching back to finish off Darius, he finds this ancient puzzle that supposedly guaranteed the rule of Asia to whoever could untie it. Instead of sitting there for hours trying to unravel the thing, Alexander just draws his sword and hacks it right in half. He didn't unravel obstacles, he destroyed them.
Part 4. The new king of Asia.
The ultimate apocalyptic showdown finally happens on the dusty plains of Gaugamela. And the way this unfolds really shows off his absolute tactical genius. Darius brings this seemingly invincible force. We're talking hundreds of thousands of men, terrifying war elephants, and chariots with literal blades on the wheels. But Alexander doesn't just meet force with force. He brilliantly lures the Persian flanks out, opens up a tiny gap in their center, and strikes violently straight for Darius. That one agile move permanently shattered the centuries-old Achaemenid Empire.
Part 5. The Indian War and Return.
So now he's the undisputed king of Asia, right? But his relentless, almost obsessive drive pushes him further east, straight into the formidable frontiers of India.
Here he fights the Battle of Hydaspes, arguably his most grueling nightmare yet. Between the swollen Jhelum River, extreme mud from heavy rains trapping his chariots, and the pure psychological terror of giant Indian war elephants, this wasn't about quick tactics anymore. It was a brutal battle of attrition against the unyielding courage of King Porus.
When the dust finally settles, a captured, bleeding Porus is brought before Alexander, and he just looks at him and says, "Treat me exactly as a king treats another king." Alexander had seen so many rulers grovel or flee, so he was just deeply moved by this guy's sheer dignity. So much so that he did the unthinkable. He gave the Indian king his entire empire back, plus some extra territories to boot.
But right around here is where the great conqueror finally hits a wall. Standing near the Ganges, facing rumors of the Nanda Empire of Magadha, a force supposed to have endless swarms of war elephants, Alexander's own men just say, no more. After 8 brutal years of non-stop fighting, his battle-scarred veterans mutinied. The man who had literally never lost a battle to an enemy was stopped in his tracks by the absolute exhaustion of his own soldiers.
Part 6. Alexander's Death and Legacy. The unstoppable force had finally met its absolute limit, and tragically, the trip back home was fatal. He was just 32 years old when the conquest ended forever. He died from a sudden, mysterious illness in Babylon, and honestly, thousands of years later, historians are still intensely debating this. Was it a catastrophic disease like malaria, or was it a calculated, poisoned assassination driven by the greed of his inner circle?
The immediate fallout was pure chaos. His physical empire shattered almost instantly, divided up among his generals. But his true legacy was monumental. He permanently linked the East and the West, kicking off centuries of cultural and scientific exchange. Yet, the most profound takeaway is his final philosophical lesson. Legend has it he asked for his hands to hang empty outside of his coffin as he was carried away, proving to everyone that the man who owned the earth left it with absolutely nothing.
Which leaves us with one of the most fascinating what-ifs in all of ancient history. What if his army hadn't mutinied? If they had crossed that final river and clashed with the massive elephant armies of Magadha? Would the invincible Alexander have finally tasted defeat? Or would he have truly conquered the rest of the known world? It's a question that forever changes how we view the absolute limits of human ambition.